Amanda, hi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, you're a running coach by trade, but you are a lot more than that. You have a huge social media presence, you have so many articles about all things running, tips, tricks. You're a complete font of knowledge in the industry of running, and I just want to know your journey to get to where you are just now.
I love that. That's a fun description. Yeah, it's been, one of those things where it kind of builds on itself, kind of like your running journey itself builds on itself. I started out like a lot of people in the corporate world, and I was actually doing e-commerce when it was like a brand new kind of thing that people were doing. So that gave me some great insights into how people were kind of using the internet and how people think. And I was also a journalism major in college. So I started this little blog on the side just to give me like a creative outlet from all the like very straightforward linear thinking of technology. And it just kept kind of growing to a point where I realized I either needed to jump in and go like all in on this running, coaching, writing thing, or I needed to stop because it was just way too much time. And so that was 2012. I decided I would go all in and I would give it a year. And if it wasn't working out, then I would go get a job again. But really, I feel extremely lucky that I had kind of that time in the business world because I think it is part of what has helped me to actually turn this into a truly successful business. I had some background and some ideas on how to treat things and approach things, and that really helped.
Because it's quite a tricky industry, I guess, to penetrate into because there's so much saturation. There's so many people now with social media. Anyone can be anything. The qualifications are super important, but also social media presence and the perception that you put out is kind of what people's first impression is. So how did you create it into a full-time business to the extent where you can do it full time, get paid for it, and differentiate yourself from all of the other people who are doing similar things?
It's interesting because obviously 2012 to now has changed so much in the landscape. And I think that has been a big thing for me is that I have been open to, well, what do I need to do next? Instead of, well, this is what I am doing. It's always kind of a, okay, what do I need to do next? And then also deciding like there's also so many hours in a day. So what things am I not going to do? Um, One of the other things that's really hard for a lot of us is to decide that we're going to niche down in terms of who we're talking to, but that's the essence of marketing. Like that's why marketing works is when you pick specifically who you're talking to. And once I started realizing all these people were saying things to me like, I love that you don't show pictures of your watch. You don't talk about your pace all the time. And I was like, well, that was an intuitive choice I made because I felt better with it. But okay, it's resonating. There's something happening here. And so I think some of it is taking time to pay attention to all that feedback you're getting and then start to realize like I already have a community that's growing. That's what I want to lean into. And so even when I wrote my book, I said it's for the middle of the pack. Like I'm not talking to the person at the front, like I'm talking to the average runner who's trying to figure out how to enjoy this and do their entire life at the same time. So I think that some of it is kind of figuring out who are you truly talking to? Because we want to talk to everyone, but who are you truly going to help? And then I come back to that a lot too. When I get frustrating messages, I try to just think, but I helped someone today. And that was the goal of putting the content out.
And then, because if you have a lot of social media followers, which you do, then they'll come to you for running advice. But then you also have your clients who you're actually coaching as well. How do you almost protect the information that you're putting out so it's not misconstrued of like you put a quote out or something out, which is if within a context, it's completely applicable. But then someone who just rocks up and sees your account and isn't being, coached by you or in the process of what you're actually saying, what you stand for. How does that dynamic work?
Yeah, it's always interesting because I mean, social media has to be generic, right? Like I can't my reel about how to start running isn't targeted to my specific client. It's targeted generally, these would be the steps you would take. And so I think for the most part, people get that. It doesn't mean you don't get messages that say otherwise, but yeah, I always sort of think the people we're coaching one-on-one, we're deep diving into their life and their body to really figure out specifically what's working for them. Whereas everything else that I'm posting might still be useful for them, the warm up, the whatever, but they're getting much more detailed and like programmed just for them kind of advice. So yeah, I think our actual one-on-one runners, they totally get it and they feel like they're getting exactly what they want. But yes, on the social media side, there is always a little someone who says, well, that doesn't work for me. And that's okay. It doesn't have to work for everyone.
For sure. And then with your one-on-one clients, if you have people who are going through their running journey, they might say your ages of your clients may vary, their ability may vary, their experience may vary. How do you almost prescribe your training? Like, I assume there's not like a one fits all recipe. Are there similarities at all? Or how do you even approach that? Especially being an online coach, because you don't actually sit down for a cup of tea with your client. There is that distance. How is that something that you've navigated?
Yeah, so everyone is definitely very different, but we know there are some universal training principles. Like I'll talk about 80-20. So 80% of our volume being easy, up to 20% hard, but it may not be. It may be less. It may be like 5% or 10%. But there are some universal principles that I know will apply. I need you to strength train. I need you to do a warm up. So we have kind of that basic foundation, but then the actual specifics get wildly different because, yes, we have some folks who are Boston qualifying, and then we just had a runner sign who is 77 and she's doing her fifth marathon. And she can't train the same as someone who's 20. She can still work hard, but yeah, we got to tailor it to what's your body doing and what's your life like now.
And what is the actual differences of a runner? Like, you can think, obviously, okay, I know the difference between a 20-year-old and a 70-year-old or a 77-year-old. I love that. Fifth marathon, amazing. But what's the difference perhaps between like a 25-year-old and a 45-year-old? Something that's a bit more murky.
Yeah. So, what gets really interesting, particularly for women in our 40s, is hormones start really changing and we're dealing with perimenopause. And so, there's like this fluctuation of energy, for one thing. So, because your hormones are moving, all of a sudden, these things that always felt so natural and so easy feel off, or you feel off, or you feel tired. And so, it's working with people in that instance to kind of figure out how do we maybe take that extra rest day and like shift schedules around a little bit when things feel a little different. You can get away with, is kind of how I put it, a lot of stuff in your 20s, like skipping the warm up. Maybe you're not doing all the strength training that you know you should and still have these amazing performances. But by our 40s, we know that we started losing muscle mass at age 30 if we weren't doing anything about it. And so we absolutely like your strength training now becomes even more important in some ways than getting your runs in. So I may have you run less to make sure we have time to get in the strength training. It also changes our fueling just a little bit. That post run recovery in our 40s is even more important. So we just have to figure out how are you going to get in that fuel once you've finished. Or I can see a lot of 20-year-olds get away with, not eating before the run, not fueling during the run. Your body is creating more energy. It's not good for you and there are impacts. But at 40, you notice that almost immediately. So it's almost like all the things maybe you kind of knew you should be doing, now you actually just have to do them.
It's super interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, women do lose their strength to an extent and their muscle mass as they grow older. So then, therefore, doing the strength workouts when you are younger is limiting that and limiting the factors of that. And I think that the discussion of, you're doing all of these like squats so that you can actually like get up out of your chair when you're 60. And all of these things that when it's, your like your arm curls so that you can like lift the duvet and make the bed. Things like that. is actually, it puts it into perspective, isn't it? It's not just you have toned arms and you can go to the beach and look amazing. Do you know, it's all of these other bits as well that I think people are talking about more, like the effect of it. It's not just for aesthetics, because I guess when social media boomed, suddenly everyone was like, oh my goodness, aesthetics. This is, everyone needs to look amazing the entire time. But it's an interesting phenomenon that perhaps it is actually for your longevity of your bones, your body. Like bone density is another massive thing that I don't actually think that many people really know about.
Yeah, I love that longevity has become like a discussion lately. And I'm sure it's because we have this baby boomer aging population. And even myself, women in our 40s are much more active than in previous generations because we're realizing it's fine and we can, and we're getting older doesn't mean we have to stop. And yeah, in the past, we didn't talk about strength training as part of bone density, but it's a big piece of it. You know, folks kind of thought, well, running's high intensity, that'll do it, but it's a different stimulus. So I love that that is becoming like a big topic of conversation. I think it's also kind of freeing in some ways for people to be thinking about, I'm choosing to do these things to feel good rather than to look a certain way, because that's like a kind of pressure versus a, oh, I'm excited about this for the rewards of just doing it.
And I want to ask you about what the actual effects on exercise and movement that menopause has on women.
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing. There's a couple things that happen. One is we know that as estrogen drops, it makes it even harder to maintain muscle. So if we can do certain things like heavy lifting, that actually sort of helps prime the body when we're missing that estrogen to tell it, nope, I actually do want to put on some muscle, or even still doing some hard workouts. So, a lot of times as we get older, we get nervous and take away plyometrics and things like that. But we do actually still want to have those in there because one of the other things that happens is we become more, oh, what's the right word that I'm looking for? We are more carb sensitive, just meaning that like when you're younger, your body takes a carb and just burns it like immediately. It's fuel. That's amazing. But as we get older, and often because we've lost some muscle, the body doesn't always use it as quickly. But when we're doing those harder workouts, doing the lifting, it keeps right on putting it back into your muscles for fuel the way we want it to.
Yeah, it kind of blows my mind because I guess the first introduction I had to all of this topic was Dr. Stacey Sims, who talks a lot about the importance of maintaining like strong bone density and also lifting weights, not just for like the aesthetics is the first thing, but then also, you know, in your 20s and your 30s, and then stopping when you're 40 or 50 or even 60. But she's like, no, it's important. And, you know, lift like significant weights as well, not just like teeny tiny ones. And I think that it's amazing that women aren't limited to not doing all of these things when they get older, perhaps as we've all kind of perceived it, but we're still strong, we're still fit, we're still able to do that. And we can preserve a lot of our fitness as well as we get older.
Yeah, I can't recommend her books enough. Roar and Next Level are both so, so good. And she is really helping us to push this forefront of trying to look more at women in sports and athletics because most studies that are out there are just on men. And so it doesn't always apply because of hormones changing. So I love that she has really pushed it. And yeah, I think the other thing that's really exciting is sort of to realize if you've been active and you stay active, your rate of decline is much, 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 much slower. So just because you will eventually get slower as a runner as you age, it's way less than we kind of anticipate. It's not like, oh, you turned 45 and suddenly your body is like, well, no more running for you. If you've been active or you've been lifting, like you can keep right on going and it's still possible to even see some PRs and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. And then with all of the articles that you have on your website, and then of course the content that you put on social media as well, you mentioned there that, you know, there's not actually a lot of literature and research on women's fitness and all of it that goes around that. So where do you find the most information from, or these like facts? And is it from your own experience, or is it from research that you've seen, or how do you source that?
Yeah, so Google Scholar is a great place to find. So I'm always looking for what studies are out there. Is there anything new? Has anything been released? I have an email that comes into me every week from PubMed, which will kind of highlight anything new in running that's come out. So I can just see if there's anything like I need to know about. And I read a ton. Basically, if any running coach anywhere puts out a book, I'm probably going to read it because I want to see like, what are you doing? What's working with your athletes? I don't agree with everything, and that's okay. There's a lot of different ways to train, but oftentimes it will make me look at something different or question things a little, and I think that's valuable.
And what do you think the biggest running misconception is?
I mean, the big one that's always out there is that it's bad for your knees, and there are enough studies on that to prove it's absolutely not true. But of course, a lot of runners have knee pain, and so it's really easy to point to that. It usually comes down to we don't like to strength train. We want to just run. And so that results in the knee pain. So I feel like it's getting better as more newer runners are starting out by both running and lifting. That was just, when I started running in 2002, no one was talking about lifting. It was just how many miles can you put in?
And if someone's listening to this and they think, okay, I get that, my knees hurt a bit, I'm up for this, I'm going to do some strength training, I've never done it before, where do they start?
Yeah, I think the basics. So don't overcomplicate it. I do have a 30-day core program on my website. It's 10 minutes a day, and it's like the easiest place to start because it's going to hit your hips, your glutes, and your core, which is what we need to work on to make sure your knees feel good. So, it's glute bridges and body weight squats. I really am a fan of starting with body weight so you learn how to really control the movement and do things with good form. Because if we add weight to bad form, then you are going to get injured. So not feeling that pressure to like on day one go pick up weights when you don't know how to. Just starting with body weight to get consistent is huge.
What's your favorite core exercise?
Um, Really at this point, I love that lifting weights is a core workout. So I like doing
Nothing
things that
endless
are sort of
planks.
yeah, like when you're doing like a single-sided, RDL deadlift or something, you have to engage your core. But beyond that, in the warm up, pretty much every single day before I run, I'm doing glute bridges or I'm putting a little mini band around my feet and doing sidewalks side to side to kind of engage everything.
And with running, there's the strength training, there's the actual running, but a huge part of this is nutrition. And I think this is also the part that people kind of get scared of because you get into a lot of like grams of this, grams of that, when to eat, what to eat. So, what in the basic lineup, what are the do's and don'ts of nutrition when training?
So, like the big couple things that I always kind of push on are not doing your runs fasted. It doesn't burn more fat, you're not burning more calories, but you are going to have an energy deficit. And so your run may not feel that good. You may end up much hungrier later in the day because you're trying to do it that way. So that's one. Two, if you're doing runs that are over 90 minutes, that's when we have to start practicing taking in fuel. And the recommendations right now are anywhere from 30 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. It's a lot if you're not used to it. So start by like taking an applesauce pouch. That's an easy one for a lot of people. And remember that what you're doing during the run is improving your recovery so that you can work out again the next day. And the same sort of thing. If you've skipped before and you've skipped during, you think you're saving calories because this is what I hear a lot. And then people are starving the next day, they're starving later in the day. And when you are starving, you aren't reaching for a pile of broccoli, right? Like you start reaching for sugary sweets. And at that point, when you're sitting down, your body isn't utilizing those versus while you're running, it's taking that in, it's immediately using it for fuel. So those are the two like immediate ones. And then the third one would be hydration. So it's surprising how much hydration can impact your overall energy. And that's one of the reasons I do like electrolytes. It actually encourages your thirst mechanism. And so for a lot of people in their workout, outside of their workout, just using a little bit of electrolytes in their water gets them to finally drink enough and feel a lot better.
I think hydration is probably one thing that I guess I was like quite naive about because nutrition is obvious, but I guess we can kind of forget about actually rehydrating as well. And then you might have a glass of water or a bottle of water, but then it's actually replacing the salts in your system as well. And this is another thing that, to go back to Dr. Stacey Sims, she's like, put a pinch of water or salt in your water, otherwise it'll flush through your system. My husband does take this a bit far, and every time I pick a glass of water up, it's salty now. But I think that it's something that is so important to do. It makes so much sense when it's actually laid out to you. And that's the role that electrolyte drinks, they are engineered to do that. But it can be as simple as just putting a little tiny bit of salt into your water, which is crazy.
Yep, absolutely. And that's, I think, a lot of us are kind of watching salt intake throughout the day. I got really aware of it because of my dad had some heart issues. And then all of a sudden, I was getting dizzy a lot when I would stand up because as a runner who sweats all the time, I needed more salt. So when you're looking at salt recommendations, like realize it's a little different for you as someone who is out and sweating and working out. Your body is actually looking for a little bit more to help balance things out.
Yeah, for sure. It's all about balance. And I guess that's something that when we talk about exercise, we always kind of come back to that, isn't it? And then another thing, when I was looking through your Instagram account, there's so much information. Everyone needs to go and have a look at it. There's so much to take in. But one thing that stood out to me was your discussion on people's running performance in the cold and colder temperatures and the effects that it has. Because I would, go out, I would do a lot of cycling. And then a bit of running. I'm getting more into it now and I'm really enjoying that cardio side of it. But then I'm like, okay, I'm in the cold. Do you know I must be burning more calories because I'm in the cold? Like my body's working harder. Like that makes sense to me. But then you're talking about like VO2 max dropping, you use more glycogen, like the muscle strength decreases. Like there's actually so much. So can you just talk to people who haven't seen the post a bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting because we talk a lot about running in the summer or working out in the summer and how hard that is, but everyone's just sort of like, oh, in the winter it must be just fine. But when it gets below freezing, really, we do start to see some decreases in performance. And the colder it gets, the more we see that. And like you said, one of the big ones is that you actually need to be fueling more during those workouts. So if you're doing long runs or long bike rides in the winter, you actually need to be fueling more because your body is burning more carbohydrates. So it's much easier to hit the wall and kind of run out of energy. And that was actually something they even saw specifically in Navy SEALs. So people who are highly, highly trained. So that was kind of interesting to me and realize like, okay, yeah, if they're seeing it, like obviously we need to do better. Um, and then, yeah, the other one that's kind of interesting too is you need to hydrate more. So, because we aren't feeling that sweat dripping down our face, it's easy to not hydrate as much. But when it's really cold and you've got little puffs of air coming out of your mouth, that's you losing hydration from your body because your lungs had to actually warm that air up and then send it back out. So you're actually losing a lot more than you think.
Yeah, that's actually quite a good point. I hadn't thought about that before because you don't really want to be hydrating with like freezing cold water when you're out on a run or a ride or whatever. But you actually do lose a lot of air, as you say. Yeah, there's so many layers to it, isn't it? And I think, as you say, people don't talk about actually training in the cold. It's all about heat and adaptation and things like that. But there are so many layers to it. Yeah, a lot to think about. Um, Another running, I wouldn't say it's a taboo. It's a hot topic. Let's say it's a hot topic. Is the warm up. A lot of people are like, nah, to the extent where there's like a lot of content about like do your warm up, and you're definitely one of the do your warm up people. So why should we do a warm up, and what is an ideal warm up?
I have said do your warm up so many times. I feel like it should be tattooed on me somewhere. Um, So really and truly, there are a couple of reasons we want to do our warm up. One is we're priming our body for what we're getting ready to do. So if you've ever started your workout and noticed your heart rate just spikes immediately, it's because you took your body from kind of resting into a really hard, intense thing. So instead, we're trying to get our joints lubricated, we're getting our muscles prepped, we're getting our cardiovascular system, our lungs prepped. A lot of people will notice once they start doing a warm up, their breathing feels easier on the run. And it's the same thing. They've just allowed everything in their body to loosen up a little bit. It does prevent like strains and some overuse and things like that. For me, the warm up is a time to also sneak in some of those little movements that prevent injuries. Like I mentioned, the glute bridges, the mini bands. Um, those are things that we all are like, I should do. But if it just becomes part of that little routine, then all of a sudden you've done it 4 days or 5 days instead of one, and it makes a big, big difference. So the warm up can be 5 to 10 minutes, kind of make it what you've got time for. Start out with, like I said, do some leg swings forward and back, side to side, do some reverse lunges, do some side lunges. I'm a big fan of lunging in every direction. That's fantastic for preventing IT band issues, which is so common. And it's a great little warm up. You're activating your glutes, you're getting your heart rate up, you're moving around. I mean, you can keep it that simple and then even just walk for 5 minutes. So get in like a nice little power walk and then transition into your run, and things tend to feel so much better. Anyone who I can finally convince to do a warm up always tells me they feel better.
Why do you think people don't like doing it? Like, have you
I
any
think
feedback? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a time issue. The idea that they need another 10 minutes when they're feeling sort of crunched to even get their run in. And so I do understand that.
And then to finish that one off, the cool down. Importance. Why did people not do it? And what should we be doing?
So it's interesting because while the warm up, we do have data on how important it is, the cool down, less important. So we want to take at least a few minutes, just especially after a really hard effort, to make sure we're letting everything come down. So not sitting down right away. That's really bad. You can get blood pooling in your feet, but that's after like a really hard thing. So if you've just done an easy run and then you walk for 5 minutes, that's cool. Like, you really don't have to spend 10 minutes doing static stretches or anything like that. There's nothing that shows us that it actually prevents muscle soreness later. Now, I will say the difference being some people have just found for themselves that if they do it, they feel better. And so that's where like you have to kind of figure out what works for you specifically versus what maybe studies have said.
Probably mental a bit as well, isn't it? Like kind of coming down from if you have intervals or whatever. Because I guess the mental side of running and sport in general, but especially like endurance sport, is huge.
Yeah, taking a second to like clock what you've done and sort of review the workout. And particularly after hard workouts, there is sort of this getting your central nervous system back to equilibrium. So then it does become important. And that's where I think stretching can be really beneficial, is it forces you to take a second to breathe, to slow down before you just rush straight from the workout into, okay, now I have to shower, now I have to eat, now I have to work. And so you're just sort of keeping that nervous system on high. But if you can down regulate by taking just a little bit, then it'll help you sort of just get your body back to baseline before you head into the rest of the day. So you aren't just continuing that workout stress.
And going on with the mental side of it and the strength that your brain actually has on dictating your workout, your perception of exercise, your perception of your ability. I guess, like being a coach, I'm sure that you sometimes probably feel like a bit of a therapist as well. You probably know a lot about people's lives, and it's so interlinked, isn't it? The mind and the body together. So how do you deal with someone who might come to you and be really underconfident in their ability, and you have this quite delicate person who's kind of used all of their um confidence to like come to you, and now they're here and they're like, I'm not sure I can do it. Like, how do you kind of deal with that? Because you know running, but it's quite a lot to then have to like actually do the other like mental side of it as well.
Yeah, it's so true. A big piece of running and performance is mental. And I think a lot of that is over the course of training, we're trying to build confidence. So doing workouts and then being like, hey, look at that's what you did, like, and taking a second to kind of take that in. Or even when the workout doesn't go well, still, okay, but look at what you did last week. And so this week, yes, it was harder, but maybe factor XYZ is why this week didn't go well. So I think a lot of it is trying to build throughout training. And then to me, there's also taking the pressure off of race day and sort of remembering it's one day out of months and months of work. And all of us have had those days where we go to work out or run and it sucks. For that particular day, you can't pinpoint a reason, but everything is just kind of off. And so to hang like your entire am I good at this on one day, I think is a really tough thing. And so instead, like, how can we make sure we're doing the right things and we're doing the best we can, and that's what we can control? But knowing that sometimes things just happen on race day, and that's okay too. It doesn't change who you are, and it doesn't take away from everything that you've completed over the previous months.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that also like the stress level of you have your fatigue level of your actual training and the stress of that. But then there's also everything else in your life that goes on can cause stress. And it all counts into that as well. So maybe you've had a massive work week, you've not done any exercise, but it gets to the weekend and you're absolutely gone. And you can't go on your run because you just have absolutely no energy left. Maybe you're getting ill, maybe you are ill. And I think that it's interesting, isn't it? Like the effect that it has on our bodies. And then equally, the other way as well, that maybe if we are limiting the stress and we're actually having a bit of rest full time, having a bit of like no screen time, or just having a really like easy time on our minds, then we probably will be a bit able to do a bit more and push ourselves more because it's all linked together.
100%. I talk about this a lot with other coaches, kind of getting people to understand total stress load. So, not just your workout stress, but yeah, your total life stress. And a lot of times when people are going through big seasons, that's when I kind of look at their training and say, like, what if we take out some, what if you just go for a walk? Like, what if we don't run, but you just go for a walk or you just do some yoga today? And keeping them in a routine, but a routine that is more calming to their body and giving them a chance to relax. And then that tends to make their runs more enjoyable when they get to do them as well.
And what do you think the importance of a routine actually is?
I think to me, the big thing is that having a routine or having a habit means you just do it. So you don't have to think, am I motivated today? Do I want to do this? Do I have a specific race? None of that matters. Now it's just something that you sort of habitually do, and that keeps you moving forward. So even if, like I said, you're not doing your run, but you're taking a walk, that walk is still so good for your mental health and everything. So if we can just keep that little bit of routine, for a lot of people, it helps them move through those really stressful periods, even decreasing the load. And then when they're ready to run again, they don't have to find the time. That's still the time that they go. That's still the time that works. And so then we just, kind of ramp back up what's happening there.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess if someone's going for a walk, it still has, the mental space. They still are outside. They're still getting those benefits from that. But then also because they outsource it, and this is where the value of having a coach comes in, they're not having this mental stress of, oh, okay, what should I do? Maybe I should do this. Maybe I shouldn't do this. I won't do this, but I'm going to beat myself up for not doing it for the entire day. Or I will do it, and then, but I actually had a really bad time doing it because I'm tired, and now I feel rubbish because even though I did do it, it was really rubbish, and like they're beating themselves up. And then you have this mental stress, probably physical stress. Whereas if you have a coach who's like, okay, chill, like 1 day off, 1 week off is not going to ruin your entire season, which is hard to look big picture when you're like in the minute, like day by day, day by day. and you think, right, this is it, my life is over. But it is all linked up, and that is where the value of someone who's actually trained to do the big picture thinking comes in.
Yeah, I often say as a coach, one of the biggest things we do is tell people to take an extra rest day, which sounds ridiculous, but that is half the time is us being like, no, I actually think an extra rest day would be the most beneficial thing you could do this week. So yeah, having that person who is able, because we're separated from the emotion that you're feeling in that day, we're separated from that. So we can take the bigger picture and say, it's this is what's going to work out best long term, or be able to chat with you, even say like, is right now the best time to be marathon training? Like, is this job stress actually going to get better in a week, or is this going to be the level that it's at? And so maybe like, do we want to just shift a little so that you don't feel this overwhelming pressure?
Yeah, for sure. The big picture is so important with that. And then you're a runner as well in your spare time is where your passion started. So, what was the journey like to making your passion into your career? Because I think that's a bit of a tricky one, isn't it? It's like where does the love actually stay, and how deep is the love that you actually want to do it day in, day out?
Yeah, I joke sometimes that maybe it's not always the best idea to have the thing you love become your job. But for the most part, I'm very lucky that I get to do it. Really and truly, like I said, for me, it was sort of, I had been running probably 4 or 5 years when blogs first became a thing. And I kind of thought, oh, okay, well, this is like a nice little outlet. I don't know any other runners really. And so that was my first community of actually connecting with other runners and realizing how much I enjoyed that. And I think being someone who likes to learn and probably just leans towards being a bit of a teacher, it made me want to get better, to answer questions and keep learning. And so, like I said, from that time to 2012, there's a good 6 years there of me kind of growing in that space and kind of figuring out, what I enjoyed about it. And it really stemmed largely from just the writing side of things, because blogs were, as noted, the big thing at the time. And then just kept kind of growing from there, like I said, because I did find that I enjoyed being able to help other people find the joy of running. So not just find PRs, but actually find like, oh, I can do this. I don't have to be a certain pace or look a certain way. I can do this and I can enjoy the challenge of it for myself.
And what does your average week look like in incorporating your own running, your own training, and therefore your sanity within that and your downtime into your weekly schedule on average?
Yeah, so I am a very, very routine person. So probably for a good decade, it's looked the same. I run Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Saturday and Sunday. And so usually in there, Saturday is like my longer run. Sunday, hopefully I'm on the trails, minus right now when it's just muddy and snowy. And then like Wednesdays are usually a speed workout, and then I'll throw 2 to 3 days of lifting in there too. So whether I'm marathon training or 10K training or not focused on any races, I tend to run about the same amount. The only thing that'll change is kind of the distance of that long run.
And with your routine, which works super well when it's working, how do you deal with like, okay, I have to be away at like a wedding all weekend, or I have something on, like, or I'm not feeling well. I guess if you're ill, you're ill. But if something comes up, how do you deal with that? Or are you fine?
I'm pretty good when it comes to travel because I get really excited to run somewhere new. So I just sort of look at like, where in that time frame can I fit in a run while I'm there because I'm somewhere new. But I will adjust things around, and maybe it means that there's an extra rest day or something like that. But I'll kind of look at my week and decide what are the most important things that I need to get done. And it might be the long run and the speed work, or I might just be like, nah, this week I can just run whatever feels good. And then kind of plan things around that.
And what are your thoughts on running like day to day? So you do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the weekend, like running back to back days, or should people like take a day off in between?
Yeah,
Thoughts?
it really depends. Like I said, I've been running 20 years. My body is so used to this mileage, and I do the things in between to help support it. So that works for me. But I have other newer athletes who very much way back when I started, I wasn't running back to back days. I was running every other day, only 3 days a week, and kind of building up because you do have to give the body time to adapt. It's not just like your cardiovascular system, it's your joints, it's your ligaments, your tendons. Everything is adapting to this new intensity and this new pressure that you're putting on it. So you have to give that time. A lot of folks will tell me, even when they've been running a long time, they feel best on every other day, and that's perfect. Others will say they're injury prone, and I often will find they are not doing any strength training. And so that might be the cause of being injury prone. So yeah, it's kind of, you've got to build over time to see what's going to feel good and work best. And it also makes a difference once you learn how to run easy. So it's hard to run back to back days if you're always running too hard.
It's funny, isn't it? It's like probably one of the most difficult things for people who are training to do is actually run easy.
It's
It's so
shockingly hard, which I posted about this the other day. I really and truly think some of it comes from when we start running, it is so hard. It's this totally new stimulus. It's hard. And then as it should feel easier, we now have an impression of what running is supposed to feel like. And so we keep chasing that same it feels hard effort level to tell ourselves that we're doing enough instead of allowing it to become easier.
Yeah, I guess also people are like looking at their pace and they think, but I can do a 10K in this time. I don't want to be doing it slowly and then feel like, oh my goodness, I'm so slow. I've lost everything because I took that rest day. It kind of goes against what people think of like improvement, 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 go, go, go. But it's so important, as you say.
Yeah, I think one of the big things I try to get people to do is to realize I don't really care if your easy day pace improves. That's not really the pace that we're worried about. Like if you're training for a race, how are your speed workouts going? Like the things where we're actually testing your new goal paces. How are those things going? I don't really care what your easy pace is as long as it truly feels easy enough. And it should be a range. It should change because you change day to day, how much sleep you had, whether you were able to fuel or you had a really hard workout this week. So that's an interesting one, though, mentally, like you said, to really sort of wrap your head around.
Going back to the mental side, it honestly just dictates everything, doesn't it? But when do you take like an off season as such as professional athletes tend to? Do you take just time off for a week or two throughout the year?
I don't really, unless I have done a big marathon or a big race, and then I'm going to take a couple weeks off a lot of times, but I don't race a ton. And that is probably partially why I don't race a ton. I really like my routine. And I enjoy my runs so much. So to have a couple weeks of not running makes me a little stir crazy. But because I am doing this more to me as my life and my lifestyle. I don't always feel like, oh, I'm burnt out and I need time off. And so I think I appreciate that I train in such a way that I don't like get myself to those burnout points or anything.
Exactly, because you do your easy runs.
That's right.
I feel attacked. Amazing. Well, if someone wants to follow you online and see your website, learn about your coaching, but also follow you online on Instagram with all of the amazing content that you put out, where should they go?
Sure. Runtothefinish.com is the website. I am Run to the Finish on pretty much every platform from Instagram to YouTube to Pinterest, Facebook, pretty much everywhere. So easy to find.
Incredible. I'll link those below, and everyone should have a look at that because I think there's so much information about women like as they age that we just need to talk about. We need to because we're all going to age. We're all going to get to the point where we're 70 and we might still want to be active. And I guess putting the work in now and the building blocks in now of strength training, actually like listening to our bodies and controlling our mind in terms of putting the mental strength into good things and not just beating ourselves up when we actually just need a day off is something that's so important. And I think having the conversation going makes it a bit more normalized and we feel a bit less alien in that.
Agreed. And it's really, really exciting to me just to see that more of us are wanting to keep going and enjoying and testing out what we can do regardless of age.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Amanda. I've really enjoyed our conversation and thank you for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I will stop recording now and